there's a specific kind of weight that most people never talk about. It's not the weight of responsibility or stress or failure. It's the weight of memory. Not the hazy, soft-edged kind that most people carry, where childhood blurs into adolescence and last year blends into the year before. No, this is different. This is the weight of remembering everything. Every conversation, every glance, every moment of embarrassment, every betrayal, every kind word someone said to you 15 years ago that still echoes in your mind as if it were yesterday. Most people forget. They move on. They let time soften the edges of pain and blur the details of joy. But if you're someone who remembers everything, you know that forgetting isn't a weakness. It's a gift you were never given. And while the world celebrates memory, while people admire those who can recall facts and dates and details, no one talks about what it's like to live inside a mind that won't let go. Because remembering everything doesn't make you smarter. It makes you exhausted. Psychologists have a term for this. It's called hyperthymesia, or highly superior autobiographical memory. It's rare, affecting only a handful of people worldwide in its most extreme form. But the reality is, many people exist on a spectrum of this experience. You might not remember every single day of your life in perfect detail, but you remember far more than others do. You remember the tone of someone's voice when they lied to you. You remember the exact outfit you were wearing the day something inside you broke. You remember not just what happened, but how it felt, and that feeling never fully fades. From the outside, this might sound like a superpower. Imagine never forgetting a birthday, never losing track of an important detail, always having access to the full library of your own life. But here's what people don't understand. Memory isn't neutral. It doesn't just store facts, it stores emotion. And when you remember everything, you don't just recall the event, you re-experience it. The shame, the heartbreak, the disappointment, it all comes back with the same intensity as the day it happened. You don't just think about the past, you relive it. Let me ask you something. Do you ever find yourself in the middle of a normal day, doing something mundane like washing dishes or walking to your car, and suddenly you're hit with a memory so vivid it stops you in your tracks? Maybe it's something from 10 years ago. Maybe it's something small, a comment someone made, a look on their face, and you feel it all over again. The embarrassment, the anger, the sadness. And you wonder why your brain won't just let it go. Why does this moment, which should have faded by now, still feel so alive inside you? That's what it's like to remember everything. Your past isn't behind you. It's walking beside you, whispering constantly, reminding you of every mistake you've made, every person who hurt you, every time you weren't enough. And the worst part, you can't talk about it without sounding dramatic. Because how do you explain to someone that a conversation from 2009 still keeps you awake at night? How do you make them understand that your mind is a museum of moments and you're trapped inside it, reliving the exhibits over and over again? Neuroscience tells us that memory works through a process called consolidation. When something happens, your brain encodes it, stores it, and over time, if it's not reinforced, the memory weakens. Details fade, emotions dull, but for those with heightened autobiographical memory, the consolidation process doesn't weaken, it strengthens. Every time you recall a memory, you're not just accessing it. You're re-encoding it, making it more vivid, more permanent. So the things you wish you could forget become the things you remember most clearly. This creates a psychological paradox. On one hand, you have access to the richness of your own history. You can recall beautiful moments, kind words, the smell of your grandmother's kitchen. But on the other hand, you also carry every wound. Every betrayal feels fresh. Every loss feels recent, and while everyone else seems to move on, you're stuck replaying the past, unable to let time do what it's supposed to do, which is heal. There's a reason why forgetting is built into the human brain. It's not a flaw, it's protection. The brain prioritizes survival, and holding onto every painful detail would make it impossible to function. So it filters, it edits, it softens the edges. But if your brain doesn't do that, if it holds onto everything with equal intensity, you're left managing a kind of emotional overload that most people never experience. Think about what happens when you try to talk about this. You mention something that happened years ago, and people say things like, "Why are you still thinking about that?" Or you need to let it go, and you want to scream because it's not that you're choosing to hold on to it. It's that your brain won't release it, but your mind doesn't ask for permission. It just shows you the footage over and over again. This is where the isolation begins. Because when you remember everything, you start to notice patterns that others miss. You see how people's stories change over time. You notice the inconsistencies between what someone said last month and what they're saying now. You remember promises that were made and quietly broken, and that knowledge becomes a burden because you start to realize that most people aren't as honest as they think they are. Not because they're malicious, but because they forget. They rewrite their own history to make it more comfortable, but you can't do that. Your history is locked in place, unchangeable, undeniable. Let me tell you what this does to relationships. When you remember everything, every fight becomes a minefield because you don't just remember what was said today. You remember every other fight, every other hurt, every pattern that's repeated itself. And when your partner says, "I never said that," or "you're overreacting," you're not guessing. You remember the exact moment, the exact words, the exact context. And yet, you're made to feel like you're the problem for not letting things go. Psychologically, this leads to something called hypervigilance. When you remember every time someone has hurt you, your brain starts to scan for signs that it might happen again. You become attuned to the smallest shifts in tone, the subtlest changes in behavior. You're not paranoid, you're just aware, because your memory has taught you that people repeat themselves. But here's where it gets complicated. Remembering everything doesn't just mean remembering pain, it also means remembering beauty. You remember the way someone looked at you when they said they loved you for the first time. You remember the laughter, the small moments of kindness, and that makes it harder to let go of people, even when you should. Because while they might forget the good times and move on, you can't. You're still holding on to every beautiful moment, every shared silence, every promise that was made under a sky full of stars. This is the paradox of remembering everything. It gives you depth, but it also traps you. You feel everything more intensely because you never get the relief of distance. Time doesn't heal your wounds. It just adds more to the collection. And while everyone else seems to be living in the present, you're living in all of your timelines at once. Past, present, and the echoes of every moment in between. Neuroscience research tells us that the hippocampus and the amygdala, the brain's emotional center, are more engaged in people with superior autobiographical memory. This means that when you remember something, you're not just accessing a neutral file, you're re-triggering the emotional response that was attached to it. So, when you remember a moment of humiliation, your body responds as if it's happening again. Your heart rate increases, your palms sweat, Your brain floods with cortisol. You're not just thinking about the past. You're physiologically reliving it. And this is why people who remember everything often struggle with anxiety, because their nervous system is constantly being activated by memories. They're living in a state of perpetual emotional reactivity. Every memory is a potential trigger. Every conversation can lead to a flashback. There's also a social cost to this. When you remember everything, you start to notice how much people forget. The promises they made, the plans they canceled, the times they said they'd be there and weren't. And while they might genuinely not remember, to you, it feels like evidence that you didn't matter as much as you thought you did. This creates a quiet kind of loneliness, because you realize that your version of the past is not the same as everyone else's. You're carrying a history that no one else fully shares. And slowly, you learn to keep your memories to yourself. You become the silent historian of your own life, carrying a narrative that no one else believes in quite the same way. But let's talk about the guilt, because if you remember everything, you also remember every mistake you've ever made. Every cruel word you spoke in anger, every time you hurt someone. And unlike most people, you know exactly how bad it was. You remember the look on their face. You remember the silence that followed. And you carry that guilt like a stone in your chest, unable to set it down because your brain won't let you forget. This is where shame lives, in the space between who you are now and who you were then, but with no fog to soften the gap. You're forced to confront every version of yourself that you've outgrown. And while self-awareness is supposed to be a good thing, when it's this sharp, this unrelenting, it becomes a form of self-punishment. You don't just learn from your mistakes, you live inside them. There's a concept in psychology called rumination, and people who remember everything are especially prone to it, because they don't have to search for things to ruminate about. The memories just show up, uninvited, fully formed. A random song on the radio can transport them back to a painful moment. Their environment is filled with invisible tripwires. But here's what makes this even more complex. Remembering everything doesn't just affect how you see the past. It affects how you see the future. Because when you've never forgotten a single disappointment, a single betrayal, a single moment of pain, it becomes hard to believe that the future will be different. Your brain has all the evidence it needs to predict that history will repeat itself. This is where the psychology gets heartbreaking. Because the gift of memory, which should make you wiser, often just makes you more afraid. You want to trust, but you remember every time trust was broken. You want to hope, but you remember every time hope led to disappointment. You want to love, but you remember every time love turned into loss, and so you hold back. Not because you don't want to feel, but because you remember too clearly what feeling costs. And yet, there's a strange beauty in this too. Because if you remember everything, you also remember every act of kindness, every moment of grace, every time someone showed up for you when you needed them. You remember the friend who called you at 2 a.m. just to make sure you were okay. You remember the small, quiet moments of humanity that most people let slip away. And while the painful memories weigh you down, these moments of light are what keep you going. This is the duality of remembering everything. It's a burden and a gift wrapped so tightly together that you can't separate them. The same memory that holds your trauma also holds your joy. The same mind that won't let you forget your pain also won't let you forget your worth. Let me tell you what healing looks like for someone who remembers everything. It doesn't look like forgetting. That's not an option. Instead, it looks like learning to coexist with memory. It looks like building enough space in your mind that the past doesn't consume the present. It's about creating distance not through amnesia, but through acceptance. This requires a kind of psychological sophistication that most people never have to develop. You have to learn to observe your memories without drowning in them, to acknowledge that they're real without letting them dictate your reality, and this is hard. Because your brain is wired to treat every memory as urgent, as immediate, as now. Therapists who work with people who have heightened memory often use a technique called cognitive distancing. It's the practice of seeing your thoughts and memories as mental events rather than as truth. Not denying that they happened, but recognizing that just because you remember something doesn't mean you have to be controlled by it. It's subtle, but it's powerful because it gives you back a sense of agency. But even with all the therapy, all the techniques, all the self-awareness, there are still days when the weight is too much. Days when a single memory knocks you sideways and you spend hours trying to climb back out of it. And that's okay. That's human. You don't have to be strong every day. Here's something that doesn't get said enough. If you're someone who remembers everything, you are not broken. You are not stuck. You are surviving with a level of emotional complexity that most people will never understand. And that takes strength, not the loud, performative kind. The quiet, enduring kind, the kind that gets you out of bed even when your mind is full of ghosts. And here's the thing, the world needs people like you. People who remember, people who bear witness, people who hold the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Because in a culture that's constantly moving forward, constantly trying to forget its own history, you are the anchor. You are the reminder that the past matters, that what we do to each other leaves marks, that words have weight. You see the patterns others miss. You notice when someone's behavior today contradicts what they said yesterday. And while that can make you feel cynical, it can also make you wise. Because wisdom isn't about knowing everything. It's about remembering enough to learn from it. But let me also say this. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to say, I remember what you did, and I'm choosing not to engage with you anymore. You are allowed to walk away from people who deny your reality, who gaslight you. Your memory is not a weapon, but it is a compass. There's a Japanese concept called mono no aware. It's the awareness of the impermanence of things and the bittersweet beauty that comes from that awareness. And in a way, people who remember everything live in a permanent state of mono no aware. Because they know that everything passes, every good moment will end. And that knowledge, while painful, also makes the present more precious. Because you know how rare it is. You know how fleeting. This is the paradox at the heart of your experience. The same memory that traps you in the past also makes you more present in the moment. Because you know what it's like to lose things. And so you pay attention. You notice, you feel deeply, and while that might make life harder, it also makes it richer. So if you're reading this and recognizing yourself, if you're nodding along because this is exactly what your life feels like, I want you to know something. You are not alone. There are others who carry the same weight. Others who understand what it's like to live inside a mind that never lets go. And maybe that doesn't make it easier, but maybe it makes it a little less lonely. And here's the truth that might be hardest to accept. Your memory, for all the pain it causes, is also part of what makes you who you are. It's why you're so loyal, why you're so empathetic. It's why you care so deeply, why you try so hard, why you keep showing up even when it would be easier to shut down. Because you remember what it felt like to be unseen. You remember what it felt like to be forgotten. And you never, Ever want to make someone else feel that way? So yes, you carry a heavy burden. Yes, your mind is a museum of moments that won't let you go. But you are also one of the most aware, most present, most deeply feeling people in the world. And that matters. Your memory matters. Your truth matters. You matter, and maybe, just maybe, the goal isn't to forget. Maybe it's to learn to hold the memories gently, to let them exist without letting them consume you, to acknowledge that yes, you remember, but no, you are not defined by what you remember. You are not your past. You are not your pain. You are the person who survived it, who carried it, who kept going even when your mind wouldn't let you rest. That's the real story here, not that you remember everything, but that despite remembering everything, you still choose to keep living, still choose to keep feeling, still choose to keep hoping. And if that's not strength, I don't know what is.